In Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader, one of the early companions you get is the Tech Priest Pasqal. He is a Magos with a very interesting storyline, and he is also an operative. Operative is currently the weakest archetype in the game and the weakest of the tier 1 archetypes, which unfortunately got overly and unfairly nerfed when they hit the assassin at launch. Impacts to assassin that somewhat hit operative, and it's never recovered from that. However, 1.5 did some really interesting buffs to plasma weaponry, and because Pasqal has access to some unique Tech Priest origin talents, his plasma rifle game is actually pretty strong. Rogue Trader does little to nothing to support single fire weapons, and it is unfortunately the weakest way of dealing damage in the game, mostly relegated to support long range sniper rifles. So that does unfortunately mean that Pasqal has the weakest archetype and the weakest playstyle because he is a single shot operative. With the plasma changes, Pasqal can actually get a lot of free attacks. Every time he uses his plasma rifles, he gets a 10% damage buff, which is coming from his unique Tech Priest origin. So Pasqal very uniquely can boost up to a lot of damage. Yes, he's not going to be as good as a soldier for clearing the battlefield. No, he's not going to be as good as a warrior for clearing the battlefield. And no, he is not going to be as good as a blade dancer clearing the battlefield. Operative is primarily a support archetype. However, because of his uniqueness, he can do quite a bit of damage. There are also a few exploits in the game that he can benefit from. Whilst mostly you will ignore a lot of the operative talents because they don't add very much, because it has a limit to get any kind of reward requiring exploits to be on enemies, and exploits only apply on main turns, not extra turns, and most of the combat is focused around stacking extra turns. Pasqal can actually slightly abuse this. Area and burst weapons are currently bugged and will gain damage bonuses from exploits without consuming them. Doing it this way with the area attack of Plasma Rifle means that you won't get access to Tides of Excellence, but you can boost up things this way. Whilst maximum invested intelligence will never outscale minimum invested fellowship, you do need someone who is going to be able to cover some of these intelligence checks. Now, two options are either Pasqal or Jay, who is a very unique companion that uses Fellowship to cover intelligence-based checks, but I'll cover that in a different video. For the early game, mostly how you'll use Pasqal is to get in a few additional shots or to armor and dodge strip enemies. One of the very good features to get in early game is going to be joint analysis, because it will apply his intelligence bonus to allies' weapon damage. However, towards the later game, once you get into the tier 2 archetypes and you can start using overcharge protocols with some of the new plasma talents in Plasma Bank to reload your weapons at a reduced cost, and even to gain additional attacks from reloading it at a unique cost, by going into Bounty Hunter, we can use this to actually get double use of Claim the Bounty. This does appear to be an exploit, but is a very beneficial one. With other talents like Hunter's Ambush, you can make 3 to 4 attacks with Pasqal very early on into his tier 2. This way, you'll be able to reload between each shot, so you'll be able to build up in a single turn from a single extra turn about 80% to his damage. This means that he will slowly build up and be a very good support archetype here. Like I said, he is mostly going to be using to armor strip bosses and reduce dodges, as well as getting in quite a bit of area damage to take out trash mods, because he can highly benefit from this. There are some other talents that you might want to use with other abilities in the late game, like Tactical Knowledge, but I found that they didn't really get much mileage. I always found it to be better to focus on trying to loop extra turns using stuff from Bounty Hunter like Share the Spoils to be able to take extra turns to armor strip and dodge strip enemies. This will create a very unique playstyle for Pasqal, where he'll be able to be jumping in and out of the battlefield with Hot on the Trail and Hunt Down the Prey, making this the best tier 2 archetype for him. Assassin has very low damage that does not scale into the late game. Grand Strategist can be used if you solely want to just use exploits, but if you are looking to do any form of damage, you're going to want to be using Bounty Hunter. Unfortunately, Executioner requires high rate of fire and multiple attacks, and because Pasqal can't dual wield guns, he's not going to be the best for this, and Operative has no way to survive in melee, so unless you are heavily relying on buffs, you're not really going to want to build Pasqal as an Executioner. Building into Bounty Hunter in your tier 2, you're going to be wanting to pick up the unique Tech Priest Plasma talents, as well as just taking the general common plasma talents. You'll also be wanting to pick up some very early uses of some talents in Bounty Hunters, like Hunter's Ambush to increase your attack economy, Hunting Surge to increase your damage, Heightened Concentration to increase your arm penetration, Expert Finesse to get out some more reloads and some more shots, and you're going to be wanting to also be getting the abilities Claim the Bounty, Cull the Bold, and eventually getting hot on the trail to help increase your attack economy. One thing that is going to be very important, as I said, is savor the kill. This means you'll be able to mark 3 enemies as prey, and if allies kill them, you'll take extra turns to be able to armor strip other enemies with analyze enemies and expose weakness. When Pasqal takes the main turn, you'll have some exploits that will be spread. Doing an area attack will be a good way to get damage without consuming those exploits, but to best use the abilities of Claim the Bounty of Hunter's Ambush and obviously getting in extra attack economy by using some of the new external power block talent and plasma bank, as well as even throwing in aiming protocol. So what you'll do is you'll claim the bounty, reload, make another claim the bounty. If you manage to hit a stun target, you'll actually get Hunter's Ambush that will refund an attack, so then you'll be able to do something like an area attack onto a group of enemies and potentially kill them. And because of the new plasma talents that will give you an extra attack anyway, you can then make another attack, so potentially getting out 4. If you kill an elite enemy, that will trigger expert finesse for a 5th attack. If you reload between each of these attacks, 5 attacks and 5 reloads, that's 100% damage increase, so this is quite big. Every crit will also be used with Hunting Surge, and you'll also use heightened concentration. Unfortunately, excess armor penetration doesn't do anything. If it did, Pasqal would probably be one of your hardest hitters, but because of the amount of armor strip that you'll have anyway, chances are a lot of that will be wasted, but that isn't too much of a bad thing. When you go into Exemplar, you will want to pick up stuff like Degraded Defense, because that means having higher rates of attacks will greatly increase your damage, but you'll also be wanting to pick up Death Dealer, because getting kills that will then give free attacks, even though the damage is low, will actually increase the amount of damage that you're doing. Another really good talent to be picking up here is Machine Scan Protocols. This will allow you to throw out exploits to groups of enemies, and like I said, you will focus on one target for analyze and expose weakness that you definitely want to kill. When you have leftover exploits, ending your turn with joint analysis will allow your allies to do more damage. Unfortunately, a lot of his talents can be tricky to use. Tide of Excellence will only be used if you consume an exploit. Ballistics calculations will only work at a certain range and if they already have exploits. Stuff like Sharpshooter will only work if you're not moving, so this can be a bit annoying. Fresh Target will only apply if enemies are at full health, and stuff like Deadly Aim will be kind of useful, but you really need to stack your ballistic skill. There is a chance that you can use Masterful Display if you really want to stack ballistic skill, but chances are you'll have really high ballistic skill, so you won't benefit too much from it because there's no way to turn excess ballistic skill into damage. Pasqal has some really powerful and unique items that will come later in the game, such as one of his helms that will stack his intelligence based on machine spirit scan protocols, but this is an Act 5 exclusive, so I don't really include it into my build, so it's not something to worry about. When you get the Ancient Plasma Rifle, you will find you get a lot of benefit out of it, but the Rage Fire Plasma Gun will be your big upgrade because the extra burning damage that you get from the effect of it can get Degraded Defense stacked on top of it. Whilst there are some good boots like Sharpshooter's boots to increase your armor penetration, chances are you're almost going to have 100% armor penetration anyway, so for most average enemies you won't really get much use out of that. With his Synaptic Coagulator, which is unique to the Solomon DLC 2 colony decisions, you can get his intelligence over 100, but again, unfortunately, operatives are multi-attribute dependent, and they don't really get too much out of it. You're going to want high intelligence, high perception, high ballistic skill, and then if you were expecting to survive any hits or even to dodge anything, you'll probably want agility and toughness, though I tend not to invest into them because going first with Pasqal isn't really going to matter too much because you won't ever have the agility to compete with the rest of the cast because of the way initiative stat blocking works. You'll find that you'll get some very useful items that can increase his tech use and his armor, which will help his just flat damage resistances, and medium armor is perfectly good for him. However, avoid the Skitari armor with plasma rifles because it will actually make your reloads cost 1 AP rather than being free. Another good item that is going to be very useful for him is the long range aim lens, because this can increase his effective range of his plasma rifles. When you shoot beyond your effective range, it halves your ballistic skill, so you kind of want to avoid doing that, otherwise you'll find Pasqal will miss a lot. Stuff like self-calibrating goggles and self-calibrating helmet will be what is useful for making Hunter's Ambush work, or even just shooting targets that have been hit by Lidless Stare. One of my favourite armor chest pieces to put on him is going to be the Hive World Origin Voidsman armor, because it will give him a nice 50 15 bonus to perception, which will help get him to 100 perception so he can use combat insight to ignore enemies' deflection. So looking at the variations that we have on the spreadsheet, as you can see here, in the early game, Pasqal will go through and he will pick up some talents for like his mechanites, as well as Ken in Uncanny Sight, which is going to be a very good one here. And aiming protocols will apply the ballistic skill to other weapons and not just to plasma. But there are going to be some options. You can potentially work out Tide of Excellence, like I said. Unless you are taking those single shots, you won't really use it. Ballistic Calculations or Sharpshooter can be used, because Ballistic Calculations does require you to have exploits up, but Sharpshooter requires you not to be moving. Perfect Spot's the one I like to go for, but you could go for Tactical Knowledge, as I said before, and then pick up Improved Tactics with it early if you want to be more of a support-based Pasqal. But getting those common talents is going to be very beneficial to you, and trying to get Overcharge protocols as soon as possible is something to go for. I actually moved it before safety training after playing around a bit, because having that by level 20 just has Pasqal online at level 20. Expert Finesse, when that procs, is absolutely fantastic, and the other stuff like Pinnacle Weaponry you don't need to get too early. Picking up an Enhanced Splash Area can actually make the area attacks hard to use, so it's not really a priority, but if you want to, you can try to get Machine Spirit scan protocols earlier, so potentially a good place to do that would be at level 34, so that is something to consider as well, or even getting it before filtering protocols. As for other variations, not only do we have some items to be suggested on here, like previously with the Argent Abelard video, we do have an option for Plasma Assassin, as well as going for Arc Rifle, though there is a current bug with them where sometimes they will randomly miss when they shouldn't. I have the same for a Bounty Hunter and Assassin, and then we even have a option for his pets. Now the pets version does drop off quite quickly, and it is better for using on lower difficulties rather than unfair, though it is possible to get through, it's just uninspiring towards the end of the run. And there are some other versions that you can use if you want to focus mostly on Machine Spirit scan protocols and going in with the Servo Skull. This version can actually out-tank a Vanguard, which is kind of hilarious. If you were looking to go Grand Strategist, like I said, you're mostly just going to be doing that to use Missionary Oath, and that's not an option that I consider to be very effective with Pasqal, but I know some very popular YouTubers have said it in the past. Chances are on your run, you're going to be deciding between Pasqal and Jay, because you're going to need someone to cover tech use and logic, whereas Jay can also cover Law Imperium as well as the Fellowship skill chest, so you'll probably end up wanting to use Jay if it's just for a skill monkey, because she covers 6 skills, whereas Pascal's only really covering 2. However, it's the 2 that you'll need, because you don't have many other intelligence-based characters that are much useful. Pascal's melee, whilst it looks good, chances are you'll never use it unless you've already been locked down by enemies, because operatives are not a melee archetype, nor do they have the talents to really be effective in melee. You'll find that over-buffing Pasqal won't benefit him too much, because ranged companions can't turn excessive buffs into damage unless they're using rate of fire gear like Argenta. However, Pasqal will definitely help your flow of combat and getting towards your victory condition. Like I said, looping turns to strip enemies' armor will mean your party does a lot more damage, and also being able to just passively increase the damage of your party, whilst also eventually building up his damage quite a lot. Because he can ignore range, he is very useful with those claim the bounties. So he's a companion that I actually very much enjoy using, though I am hoping that Operative will see some buffs and reworks in 1.6 and potentially some increases to just the Tech Priest origin in general. His Machine Spirit Communion can be quite useful for lowering the recoil of your allies and increasing it for enemies, as well as I said, like getting those extra exploits out. So he can ramp up damage if you do give him extra turns. It's just going to be a little tricky and very AP intensive. Pascal's definitely a higher skill ceiling character. No, he won't ever compete with the damage of Argenta, but he doesn't really need to, because that's not the role he needs to fulfill in the team. He's there to help your other allies get through enemies' armor and guarantee those hits, and as a bounty hunter he is very good for that. That's all I've got time for in today's video. If you're looking to see some more gameplay of Pasqal, do check out the previous build video where I will explain every talent in excruciating detail. And if you just want to know where gear is or what the talents actually do check the description below to get to my spreadsheet where I've explained all of this in a very nice, easy, readable format. I'm Revan619. If you like this style of video, do give me a like, and I will be returning with full in-depth build videos when we do get for 1.6. But for now, I'm going to continue covering off some companions in these style of talks.